Okay, so welcome everybody. We're so happy you are able to join us today. This is the first event that we're hosting, and the event is hosted by the RISD Alumni in Photography Affinity Group and the RISD Alumni Association. So this is the first event that we're hosting like this. So we're looking forward to doing more events like this in the future. And yes, so if you have any more information about the RISD Alumni and Photography Group, you can reach out to us or to Tran at RISD, and we can fill you in a little bit more about what that group is and what kind of goals and objectives we have for that group. So we're very happy to have our esteemed panelists today. And that includes Julie Paris. Welcome.
Great to be here.
Henry Hornstein and Giselle Florez. Yes. So welcome. So I want to jump right in and ask a question, which is just kind of for each of you to respond to. But I wonder if you could tell us about your trajectory. How did you find photography and how did you make it into your career? So Julia, you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. Great to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm going to screen share while we get into my story. Okay, great. So currently, I'm gonna state where I am now, and then I'm gonna work backwards a little bit to give this conversation a little bit more context. I am the founder and photographer of a creative studio called Analog is Heavy, and the creative studio is with a focus on photography. And I created this studio after 15 years of working independently as an art director and photographer, working in advertising agencies. I'll get into that more in a minute. But I have not had a very direct path from RISD graduation till now. It's been a very colorful path. It's been a bumpy path at times, but everything in that path has helped shape where I'm at now, just as everything I'm doing now is also shaping what I will do to come. I think that's really important to remember and to understand. In this creative studio and Analog is Heavy, we partner with advertising agencies, design studios, startups, to bring to life their brand. Usually they're more culture leading, they're cooler, the products are cool, there's a little bit of cachet. And so what I try to do is infuse a lot of nuance, color, texture, really use the locations, the styling, the casting to tell that story in a nuanced way. And I think that's absolutely important right now, but also something that I value in my work and that I love in my work. Where I started out after graduation, I tried to take as many jobs in photography as I absolutely could. I had school loans when I graduated, and so it was a necessity for me to always be working. And that hustle helped me start out doing things like with wedding photography. I started a wedding photography company. I also worked teaching photography at an arts program with a local museum. And I just cobbled together a bunch of different projects. But what that allowed me to do was to try lots of different aspects of photography. It allowed me to teach. It allowed me to figure out how to start building a business. How do you interact with clients? How do you deliver for a project, or sometimes for weddings when it was rainy and the weather was terrible in New England. So it gave me a lot of different opportunities to get my feet wet. Oftentimes I felt like I needed a direct path. It felt like my design friends that graduated with a design degree had a more direct path, and I was often kind of ticked off that I didn't have a direct path, and it wasn't as easy for me to just get a job right out of school. But in actuality, I feel like that has allowed me to shape all the interests that I have in the arts. I did a lot of printmaking, a lot of painting. I still do this on the side. I'm now able to shape that and form that into my current career in my creative studio. Shortly, about 6 years after graduation, I ended up getting an opportunity to work at an ad agency. And this was my first venture really into straight up advertising and into that world with photography. And my opportunity came as a producer. I didn't get to shoot right away. Photography had always been something I was growing on the side. But that start into the advertising world really got me really started thinking about storytelling and narratives, and how are we representing product? How are we representing people? How are we representing people's stories within our work? And I really loved the combination of the creative opportunity and the strategy, the brand strategy of what we're trying to do, what is leading us, what is guiding us, what are the creative guardrails. And for me, I found that I really thrived in that space, and I absolutely loved it. And after slogging through, producing multiple campaigns and events and continuing to grow my photography on the side, I was finally able to make a break and was promoted to start the in-house photography department at that ad agency, and to produce and shoot for client work. And that was during the recession. When I was feeling trapped and I was feeling frustrated and I was feeling like I had recently graduated and I'm stuck, that opportunity broke out from pushing, from trying, to just not giving up on creating work, creating what I love to create, and putting myself out there, trying lots of things failing, but also lots of things going really well. So I want to be mindful of time. I could keep going, but in a nutshell, I've been out for 15 years, 16 years now. And you never arrive. You never just cash in your career. Your career is always evolving. And 15 years later, I feel like just now I'm starting to actually make that work that has always been in me to make. Not that the work that I had made before wasn't something I cared about or wasn't something that I was passionate, but I feel like just now I'm really starting to have those conversations and push my work in a space that that completely aligns with who I am and my creative vision. And I think that's really exciting. There's a lot more to come. So let me wrap it there. Your journey is never over. I think the more twists and turns your early career can take, although maybe frustrating, although maybe a slog, although absolutely a hustle, is absolutely worth it, because that gives you an opportunity to really find your niche, to really find what part of photography, the photography world, do you want to play? Where do your talents, where do your interests really set you to be passionate about within the larger career?
Thank you. I have some more questions about those twists and turns that I'd love to hear some specifics about that later on. But for the time being, let's move on to Giselle.
Hello, everybody. Well, I loved hearing all of that. Julia, that was great. I love hearing the origin stories of how people are where they are now. I feel as though my stories, it goes a little, it's very similar, and there's so many paths and so many things we've all come to discover in our journey. I want to, let me start screen sharing over here. Okay, can you all see that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So my journey's a bit different. Well, I majored in illustration, and photography was something I started to do the last few years of college with Henry Hornstein. And I really wanted to shoot what I love. I started to really pursue photography after RISD. Started out at a photo agency, just managing portfolios and whatnot, answering phones, and eventually saw a company that was a digital capture company right when photographers started turning to digital mediums. And I badgered that company regularly because I wanted to work there, and I knew nothing about it really. And they ended up hiring me. I had a few interviews and they hired me, and they taught me everything about digital capture. And I got to assist a whole array of different types of photographers, from fashion to still life. And I really got to see a really nice variation of what photography in the commercial world brings. After that, during that time, I really resonated with a photographer that I like to work with called Richard Pierce. He was a still life photographer. I loved the nuance to the lighting. I've always loved light. I've been chasing light my whole career. I feel like at this point it's become a major player. As far as career, so then Barney's New York contacted me because I was working with them with a fashion photographer, Greg Cadell, and they saw my still life work and they wanted to start an in-house photography studio, and they wanted me to lead that. I had a budget, I set up their studio, I started their whole in-house program, and then from then on, you know, I liked doing that, and that was a real challenge for me and wonderful. But then I started really getting antsy for creativity. Web photography only went so far, and I started with, let me get to my, so here's a variation of the different things that I've kind of delved in the past 15 plus years since graduating. Here's a still life photography for a client that I love. Small labels are my favorite to work with. There's a burned bag here that I wanted to speak of. This is what led me away from working in-house photography, and this image right here of burning a Fendi is what gave me the courage and the passion to find my own vision. I started my own still life photography studio, and from then on I had a good 15 years of working with clients, delivering products, delivering shots, and also having my own editorials where I was exploring different things that mattered to me, like the lights in this shot are the bridge, or the Williamsburg Bridge, or the Brooklyn Bridge actually. I was really into running at the time, running ultra marathons and really challenging my physical capabilities as well, and learning about life, you know, trips, travels, traversing the world. I have always kind of been a little outside of the norm for still life photography. I'm always chasing this type of elements within my work, water, fire, explosions, laser triggers, you know, I do all kinds of different things. Just in 2018, I started really working with my 4x5 camera digitally and exploring a new avenue for myself. These are light works that I've been exploring ever since. Right before that, as far as like the path, I had kids, and then I actually stopped doing photography for a little while, for a few years, mostly because life was so chaotic. And at one point, I was so obsessed with making ice cream. I started my own ice cream label, New York Ice Cream Gallery. And I went to a commercial shared kitchen. I was like, this is what I'm doing from now on. You know, maybe photography isn't even for me. You know, I think I just needed a mental break. And I started creating, I started videotaping the ice cream that I was making so much, and taking photos of it so much that I ended up navigating back to photography again. But the idea of life is really long, and you can choose different avenues as you go, and everything will eventually make sense if you continue following your passions. All these parts of life really come back, and they all have their place in what you want to say. This is my Behance. So social networking was big in my renaissance, I feel like, after kids. I learned all about what I had missed with social networking. Finding your audience is something I've been really into lately. Here are some light works that I started exploring into past the last image that I showed you. These are light waves. This is light passing through in time. This is Times Square. This was a whole bunch of images that I made, exploring different types of light and LEDs and different works. This is a flag. There's a lot of symbolism in my work right now. It's kind of turned to a very artistic expression, and I'm just delving into what I really want to do. Here's the transmissions of light. These are like almost space-like, you know. I love that we're going into space now more often. There's been some great developments there. But the beauty that these light waves are giving, and the textures and patterns that nature has they blow my mind. So that's where I've been. Different, and the digital media has also been a huge part of my life. So mixing digital with light and water has been something I've very much been into. A lot of these the quality is such. And so then I started doing video as well when I was really looking into the moment between the capture, doing long exposures and trying to find more within that. So I have a few different video works that I started doing with light. Kind of finding a center, finding something that feels healing has been where I've been headed in my artwork. But also seeing like what it does with our digital existence is like, it's become such a part of us now, especially with being at home and trying to communicate through computers. There's a lot to explore. This thing's, I don't have patience. Here we go. This is water on a screen. So yeah, this is kind of where I am now. I love to do this work. These are different things I've made. So I've also read a book around 2018 when I was re-entering what I wanted to do photography-wise. I started researching blockchain and heard about the spatial web and the Web 3.0 that is being developed right now, and started selling artwork through this new web space. It's given me a platform to show my work. It's given a platform to build a new audience of people that can appreciate this type of work. That's where I've been focused. This is a long exposure soup can. This was an Andy Warhol tribute about existing. We can all exist together, I hope. And I split it into different pieces. I made a coin collection, I gave out to attendees of an art show. These are all blockchain assets. It's hard to explain quickly, but I'll show you the slides. And these are fine art pieces as well. And there's a whole world of VR happening. Digital galleries are all over the place. There's so many venues for showing coming up. And these are a few of the ones I'm in right now. And that's it. Is that good for now?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Should we move on to last but not least, Henry?
Well, thank you. And also just thanks to Tran and the RISD Alumni Affinity Group. Do I have the title right on that, Brian?
Yeah.
Photo Affinity Group. You know, I'm just listening for doing this. This is great. And the connection, and Julie and I, and Giselle and I have been in touch over the years, and they've both been really great about visiting with students over winter session. And so we've been able to stay together in, you know, keep our friendship over that time. But what strikes me when I listen to them, and, you know, Brian's probably got similar story, I'm sure, but a couple of things. One, about cobbling your career together, especially at the beginning, and trying to find your way, but also trying to pay back the student loans and, you know, and so forth. We all do that, I think, pretty much. And it's almost like your parents, you know, you didn't know what they were like when they were young. Well, your teachers, you didn't know either, probably. You know, as we are now. But, you know, Brian too, I'm sure, but we all struggled early on and did lots of different things. We never played roller derby. I didn't hear that, Giselle.
Oh, I did, yeah.
Roller derby
A lot of twists and turns. It's hard to fit in 5 minutes.
But you know, we did crazy things, and we did fun things, and we were up and down. And same with me. And also that was one thing I wanted to say. That cobbling together thing is, you know, and I think Julia said it best. It makes you strong, really. You have to stay on your feet. You have to be resourceful. You have to appreciate when good things happen because of the not so good things along the way. And so anyway, there's that one thing. And then the other thing, the closeness of the RISD community. I mean, that's a big part of why you're paying for this degree. And maybe you don't appreciate it quite so much as you're in school. You have your pals, your friends, your community that you trust and hang out with and go drink beers with and everything. You have those people, but they grow into also lifelong friends often, and also people you work with professionally. And that strikes me especially, again, as Giselle was talking, I remember her early days with Carrie Hunt. I don't know if Carrie's out there now, but so I'm going to share my screen a little bit and tell you what I'm up to now, but I'll try to make it quick. But, so let's see. Yeah, so I'll go from the beginning to now. When I was a grad student at RISD, I was a photographer for a summer at the Thompson Speedway in Connecticut. And I've dug back into those pictures, and I'm making a book now that I hope will be out next year. Again, this, you know, this lockdown, who knows exactly. But the book's designed, and the designer is Carrie Hunt, who is graduate of RISD, I think, 1998 or so, something like that. And she's done really well as a graphic designer. We've worked together several times over the years. And so this is my little book that's coming out. but these are old pictures and we hang on to them. And sometimes when I took them, I don't know if they were so great, but they're kind of cool now, with styles and the way people looked, and, you know, their histories now where before they were of the time. And some of you know, I used to be a history student. And so a lot of my work and a lot of my thinking has to do with that. Anyway, here I'm showing you this because it's something I'm doing now, but I did back then when I was cobbling things together. And I'm working with a RISD student, now friend, Carrie Hunt, who's wonderful. And so I'm doing that. And then I'm also, as just about everybody's trying to do these days, is trying to work in film, video. And I just made a film. It's just, I hope it'll be out at the end of this year, next year probably, about a friend of mine, Belito, who's a performer, club performer in Buenos Aires. And these are the credits that just came in. The credits were designed by Cara Buzel, who's a RISD faculty, graduated RISD recently, RISD faculty. John Gurley, Gurley's dad teaches English, but John graduated FAV, I think 3 years ago now. We've worked together a lot over the last 2 or 3 films I've made. Michael, I don't know who the hell he is. Andrew is a faculty at RISD as well. I guess my point is that, you know, if you let it, RISD will stay with you, help you in a lot of ways, but also be fun, you know, be part of your enjoyment of what you do. And for me, that's been a big plus, having people like Giselle, like Julie, you know, as friends now, and people I work with sometimes, and so forth. So those things I think are really important for me, and I'm sure for a lot of people down the road. The teaching, I know Tran has asked us to talk a little bit about the future with this thing and what's going on in the department. Brian's better to talk about that because he's shaping that. I'm kind of tagging along best I can, but he's really shaping it along with, Stanley, who's a new faculty. And I think we have another new faculty coming. I haven't gotten the news on that yet, but so things have changed since a lot of you were at RISD. Eva Sutton, Ann Fessler, Deborah Bright, if you go back a little further. These are all people you may be familiar with or have had as teachers. They're all gone. I'm still kicking around. Steve Smith is, Stanley's new. Of course, Brian, we got lucky and got him, 5 years ago now, it must be, God. And there'll be a new person for at least a short term, we'll see. And so that's kind of where we are now. I think we're doing a good job. I'm sure we are. There's the crit side of things, which is one thing, but we're also, I think, and maybe people underrate it a little bit. I don't know, but we have a very, very good technical side of things. I mean, you always were well trained, I think, in that end. If nothing, if anything, we're even more trained. You'd be more trained today. The digital side is really, very strong with Steve kind of heading that up, but a lot of support with that. And so that's kind of, I think, where we are now. But I think what's really interesting too about where we are is, and not just us, my last thought on it, I think for a lot of artists, a lot of photographers and so forth, one of the most popular classes at RISD Photo is the non-silver class, alternative process. I can't remember, Brian, what we're calling it these days.
Antique and alternative processes.
Antique and alternate, very popular class. Steve Smith's teaching it now. Anna Strickland has in the past taught it. And for many years, 20 plus years, I think. And, it's such a popular class, and it really speaks to the fact that photography is 200 years old. It's not what's happening only today in Chelsea or Lower East Side or wherever it's happening, but it's also had a long history. and people are delving back into that history and finding inspiration and just finding fun. You know, you're not in front of a computer, you're making stuff. And I think for a lot of students that that resonates as well. So anyway, I'm sure there are questions for everybody. And I don't know who's out there. I'm disappointed. I'm going to get a group from a list from down the road, but I'm sure some people I know, and nice to connect with you.
So yeah, exactly in line with what you were talking about, Henry. One of the things I'm always telling students is that the community that you build in art school and in undergrad and grad school are people who know your work like no one else. You know, in your professional life, you meet, and I'm sure you've all experienced this, where you meet all kinds of people who tell you wonderful things about your work. But to actually get good advice, good criticism about what's happening, you kind of have to retreat to the people who knew your work from ground zero, right? And so that community is so important. And for me, in graduate school is one of the reasons, you know, that graduate school was so important to me, is because I built such a strong community, and that was at Columbia College in Chicago. I'm still in touch with many of those students and people, and often refer work that I'm working on and new ideas and things to them, because I go to them first. They know the work better than really anyone. So here's a question for all of you. And, you know, we have a couple of questions coming into the audience. If the audience just wants to use the Q&A for questions, that would probably be easiest, and we'll get to those in a little bit. But we all have experiences that kind of live with us from art school. I mean, when I still to this day go out and photograph, I can hear one of my professors, Bob Thull, his voice in my head telling me to pay attention to the background of my pictures. Something as simple as that, which was just so obvious and so important at the time. So what stands out from your experience as a student in the photo department at RISD, or from your photography classes?
I'll jump in if that's okay.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that has really stayed with me is the learning how to think conceptually. Absolutely, you know, technical skill was absolutely reinforced. All the technical skill was there, but to learn how to think conceptually and to think broadly about image making. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? How could you push it further? How can you take it from point A to maybe point E that you hadn't thought of before? That's something that has really stayed with me, is the evolution of a work, evolution of a series and of thinking, and continuing to push it and push it and push it until it's where the work says it wants to be, really. Listening to the work, getting out of the way, and figuring out how to give the work what it wants. That's absolutely something that stays with me.
Great, thank you. Giselle?
Absolutely. That is one super important thing that I learned from RISD, is thinking conceptually. Well said. Also, I'm actually very happy to hear that you have the antique process is still happening. I am so happy that I learned 4x5 at RISD. I actually still work 4x5, just digitally now.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the biggest things for me is having that knowledge, the knowledge of all the all the classic explorations of photography. Now I feel like are more important than ever to keep exploring. We have a new way of analyzing them digitally, and a new way of seeing them instantly, which is something that we never had before. A lot of my work has to do with time and having the instant display as to what you're working with gives you so much more freedom to explore all the variables that go on in photography and all the different changes that can happen within your captures, you know, opposite of just taking an iPhone photo. I think we all need to explore that a lot more. I'm sure a lot more beautiful things can come into this world if we keep exploring those from a classical perspective. That's my favorite.
So another question is, you know, it's wonderful to hear, and especially looking back on, you know, your career and developing your career. You know, so often we kind of focus on the successes, but I'm curious, you know, what are some of the pitfalls? And this is especially, I think, helpful for students to hear. You know, I wonder if you could each describe some of the more challenging times in your career, you know, where, you know, Giselle, you even kind of mentioned like you had this kind of like crisis a little bit where maybe photography isn't even the right thing and maybe you want to move on into something else. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about those kinds of things.
Yeah, exploring. So working with clients was my main thing for a good 15 years. Doing assignments and trying to do them creatively, of course, with my own vision. Something about chasing that client down to the point where I felt like I had like either my pool of resources, the ways I was communicating to the outside world, I wasn't finding that many clients, new clients, and I didn't know why. I had my same email list. I was not social mediaing, you know, anything. Social media took off during the years I had kids. So I totally had a crisis, I feel like, of exploring something new, of seeing what else is out there before I continue on. And now I'm like on my, it's definitely mid-career, you know, it's like what happens right before you enter that mid-career vision as to what you're going to do for the next 20 years. You know, it's almost like you have the good 20 years after college, and then the 20 years that come after that. And there's a lot that can happen in between. And it was super hard. It plays with your mind, and you have to really keep. The one thing that kept, thank you, Henry, for continuing to visit my studio. It wasn't always easy to speak with everybody, because it's when you don't really know where you're going, it's not that easy to give advice either. So, you know, I tried to keep it as honest as possible, and continuing the shoot what you love kept in my head. Shoot what you love, shoot what you love. And it's like, just do what you love, you know, and then do what you love ends up, if it's shooting that you love, you end up shooting what you love, you know. It's just a great advice to continue.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with what you're saying, Giselle, about not knowing the path ahead of you being so difficult, and that it's really, really messes with your mind sometimes and can be very foggy, confusing. I mean, I would echo that to say, you know, while my other friends were getting promoted and getting opportunities and had more of a linear path to move forward, I felt like I was still kind of on this swerving path, working odd jobs, working at Whole Foods, you know, bagging groceries, just taking jobs to pay the bills, and then continuing to shoot absolutely what I love and build my career on the side. And it's a slog, man. I'm going to be honest. It is a slog. But that's what was really hard for me, is that I didn't necessarily understand that there wasn't a path that I follow. I feel like different disciplines have a different kind of trajectory, but especially with photography, especially now, I feel like there's so many different areas and ways that you can explore and work professionally and try new things. There isn't one path you take to move from point A to point Z. And it's really easy in those times to feel completely frustrated and overwhelmed and to just give up. And a lot of people give up and they drop out. And if photography is something you really, really love and you're passionate about, just know it's going to take time. Anything worth fighting for takes time to develop, for your mind to develop, your thoughts, your ideas to develop. And you have to work through that. If you don't have that struggle and that path that's pushing you forward in one way or another, even if it's a very windy path, I feel like it would be easy to not find, what you truly love to shoot or where you truly want to end up. So yeah, absolutely. I hustled jobs and then grew my photography business on the side for a good 10 years. Even though I was working in advertising and liked advertising, I wasn't always only shooting.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to keep going. You just have to keep going.
I mean, one of my professors used to always tell us that what we were committing to and what we were signing up for was a lifetime of work, a lifetime of being a photographer. It was actually very freeing because it reminded you that, yes, there's going to be times when it doesn't seem like the right thing or doesn't feel right, or you doubt it, or your expectations don't necessarily meet your results, right? But again, if you are committed to it as a lifetime of work, you will see through all that and continue to produce, right?
There's so much we see with social media now, and there's so many ways to look into other people's lives, and everybody's just saying their best, and everybody's showing their best, which is important. You need to know how to cut the chatter in your own brain, though, and really focus, because you are your best fan, and if you have to continue your path, and see the ones that inspire you. Continue the ones who are successful in the way you wish to be successful. Those are the ones you need to follow. Those are the ones you need to see how they're doing it, learn as much as you can, be that sponge, so that then you can attribute it to your own work.
Yeah, I mean, so much of that is, it speaks to the changes in photography over the last several years. And I remember, God, it must have been 20 years ago, interviewing Sean Callahan, who at the time was editor of a magazine called American Photographer. Some of you may remember that magazine, but I was interviewing him and I said, what's this digital photography thing they're talking about? This is before the Canon 5D. So people didn't really know on the ground what was coming down. And I said, what's it going to do, to me, to photographers, for photographers? And he said, digital photography will change your job description. And I didn't know what he was talking about then, but it's definitely true. All the things you're talking about, social media and everything, you're doing the marketing yourself, you're doing the design yourself, you're not just taking pictures anymore. You're not just taking still pictures, you're taking video, or you're doing installation work and mixing it with the arts. I see Diane asked a question about mixing still photography with other arts, and it's happening now. I mean, not for everybody, but I don't know what other people have to say about that, but it's, you're in school and you have your community and and then you're out of school and you don't anymore, unless you've been smart enough to build that community and have the people and have the relationships with other students that you graduate with and your professors and techs and whoever it is, who you feel comfortable with, who you trust, whose judgment you trust. And because when you get out there, you're on your own. You're like a small business trying to make it happen. And that's what you really are, And Julie, I remember your whole food days, and wasn't Rob Baker there with you? I don't know if Rob's here. And
He was absolutely there.
Rob
Yeah.
worked there too, right? I
Yes.
remember going in and seeing you there, and I thought, well, that's a hardworking woman, you know. And but I didn't know it was a desperate woman. That was really why you were there, I guess. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, our jobs are very complicated, but it's what Brian's teacher said. Really, it's years ago, Chuck Close made the graduation speech, and he said he spoke to the parents. He didn't speak to the students, and he said, you know, I know a lot of you are worried the arts isn't like law school or anything like that. He said, but you just gave your children the opportunity to have the best life that anyone could have. If they can become artists, there's no better life, and that's what you've given them. And I believe that still. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that does go into Diane's question, which is such a wonderful question. I appreciate it, Diane. Can you all speak to the evolution of photography? It seems that during the 20th century, the specificity of photography was defended by isolating it. However, in looking at the future of the medium, should we continue to defend the medium by isolating it, or do you think about combining it with the other arts?
I think there will always be beauty to every category of photography that you can find. There will be greats of every category. I definitely have been working on mixing it with all the digital developments going on. Right now I'm working towards 3D sculpture with my video pieces. Like, it's going to be like an immersive sculpture you can actually go into in VR. So, and working with sound in different elements in this virtual world. There's like, there's so much to explore. You know, photography on its own is beautiful. I love prints and even printmaking, the texture of the paper. There's something great to be seen in person with that. But now that we are so digitally oriented, I feel like there's so much that needs to happen in this digital media with photography. And there's so much to be attributed to a really great image. And that's still going to be very powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Giselle completely. I feel like the fundamentals will always be really important. I feel like understanding technology, whatever the technology you're using to make your images, or expanding that and combining different disciplines, understanding your craft, understanding how to communicate, all of those things that are true to still life photography or just still photography, those will still be true. But kind of like what everybody's saying, it evolves into something new, right? I think there's always going to be a place for just still imagery, but why stop there? Everything is continuing to evolve. Everything is becoming very multidisciplined. I mean, absolutely, everything you said, Giselle. And why should we keep it to one small perspective of photography? I think it's exciting to explore and to push things into spaces that we've never known. Maybe that's not everybody's work, but that's absolutely going to be some people's work and their joy. So why limit it? Let's open it up. Let's push it further than it's ever been. And let's still value the skill and the craft and the thinking and everything that we've used before. Let's apply that forward in new ways.
Also, to add to that, collaboration with people that are experts in all their fields. Yeah. It's totally happening in so many ways. And
absolutely,
everybody's attributing their perspectives together and making new.
So that runs right into my next question, which is how is working in photography today? And how do you anticipate it changing, or has it changed with the current COVID-19 situation?
Julia? I feel like you're working more commercially right now with that.
Yeah, I do have an answer. I have a twofold answer. One, right now it's slow for everyone. I think right now we're trying to figure out what are our capabilities of working with a small bare bones crew. How much are we able to do? What kind of spaces would we need to do that? How would we work on location versus in a studio? Right now it feels safer to work with other people distanced outside. The weather's nice, so that affords us to do that. I haven't been getting any jobs for that right now. I think it's something that as photographers we've been talking about. How could we protect our crew? How do you do hair and makeup right now with COVID? So these are things that we're trying to figure out. I think also when the vaccination is available, that's going to change the situation and give people a little bit more confidence, give clients more confidence as well. But I think that we need to start thinking differently in terms of protecting ourselves, but also others. Secondly, oh, go ahead.
No, second, do your second. Okay.
Secondly, about working in photography today, I'm going to shift it to a little bit different perspective, but that's still very valid, is especially working in photography, commercial photography, as a white photographer, the responsibility to your work and how you are representing people, who is being represented in the work, how you are telling other people's stories is huge. It's always been a responsibility. It's always been there, but absolutely today, if you're a photographer, you can't just walk onto set, receive a shot list from the client, and just do what they say. You, as a collaborator, need to feel empowered to speak up if something feels off, to make sure your crews reflect lots of different types of people, to make sure your hair and makeup is appropriate for the types of people that your talent that you're going to be shooting that day. And I think it's really important to think about your projects, think about your client projects, who you're representing, how, why, what they're wearing, what they're doing, and get buy-in from your crew. I think it's responsible, it's respectful. If you have a practice that is not built on speaking up and speaking out for equality of all peoples, and you're shooting people of many different ethnicities and backgrounds, then you're just profiting off of the backs of those different people. And so I want to encourage everyone to today, yes, with COVID, but also yes, with equality, be responsible, value the different voices and the different stories and the different nuances that go into a shoot. Take that responsibility and speak up.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you. That was really great to say that. Absolutely. Something I just found out recently, there's a website called Create in Place. It's all about promoting yourself and what you can do in your own space that you already have. You can even, you say who's available in your household, even as models and what types of work you can do in your own space. It's pretty interesting. I'm working on applying because I find it pretty cool. I live in my own studio, so I can create all kinds of things at home. Most of my work has been done at home. So yeah, I think there's things developing. Everybody's trying to figure out how to move forward in creating assets, photography wise, commercially wise. Things are shifting. I don't know. We'll see. As far as what I've been doing, I've been headed towards a blockchain exploration. I'm finding out there's a whole scene of art and photography within it. I've been pushing photography in this new world There's plenty of VR artists. They're called crypto artists, plenty of people talking about decentralization of things. And, it's very political too, but, there's a lot of things developing digitally for society. And there's like an art market being developed within it. Yes, and so blockchain assets, there's something called non-fungible tokens, NFTs, which are like a provenance-based digital asset that's like has a history behind it. So whoever owns it, whoever transfers it, it always has like a receipt behind it. So now artworks are not just JPEG representations. You can actually own something, and there's only one to it. There's only one that can be owned. There's a whole revolution starting behind this with Christie's. Christie's is training a whole bunch of people, learning how to be buyers in art of this kind. There's museums. The Tate Modern is doing a lot of collaboration and exploration into the space. It's just starting to be known by a lot of different museums and organizations and galleries. There's a Kate Voss gallery that's really great and has had a really heavy hand in this world. Yeah.
Giselle, there's been a few questions for you.
Yes.
I don't know, in the Q&A
Yes.
area down there, but it's crypto art and, well, not about Bitcoin, but
Create in Place, I think, is the website
that you mentioned. And do you
oh,
see
can I
any
answer?
questions there?
Yeah.
You can answer it live if you want.
Okay.
Whatever you want to do, but
Well, I kind of explained crypto art a little bit. It's art within the blockchain sphere. So how would you? So there's a book that I read that got me into this whole understanding called The Spatial Web. If you start reading that, it will blow your mind, and you will be launched into this questions of what is happening here. And similar to Bitcoin, somebody mentions here, that's like an aspect of it. Ethereum is the type of currency that a lot of this stuff goes on, which can be traded back into USD. I could go on, like I don't know. There's so much I love speaking about it because I've been deep into it since last year. Kind of like finding my audience, finding all these different developments that are going on within it.
if you're confused by it, it is a little bit complicated. And when we visited last year, I think there was one person in the class who totally got what Giselle was talking about. And everyone else was kind of, checking their phones and trying to figure it out. But it is a little complicated, maybe too complicated for here. But that book would probably be a good starting place, I would think. Yeah.
I'll also share a link to my presentation. There's a bunch of links on there with my crypto art, and you can kind of look through it and see the different venues that I show in.
And I think it speaks to something that Brian was getting at too, that, how's all this crisis, how does it come down to us after it's under control? How will things change? And I don't think anyone really knows how it'll change, but my guess is it's going to go into, part of it's going to go into this business Giselle has gotten herself deep into. A lot of it is going to be, I think, do-it-yourself galleries and marketing. And I'm not sure what's going to happen to the art world, because that's our business, I guess, Brian, that part of what we do besides teaching, not so much clients. I guess our clients are collectors or gallery people, curators and the like. And it's going to probably make a big difference. And one thing that I think Tom Gitterman said to me, and Brian knows Tom Gitterman Gallery, and well, they're moving now, but they were on 57th Street. But he said one of the problems he's noticed is that collectors used to be, used to be committed to an artist or a group of artists, a type of art, and collect as they went along, as years went along. He said a lot of the younger collectors, he said, are just really interested in a couple of pieces, and then they move on, they spend their money elsewhere. And it's a challenge for the galleries. And it's something, if the galleries aren't able to sell your work or aren't doing it for whatever reason, then you have to step up probably and do it yourself, or find another way to make a living. And so, it's a big question. I mean, we could raise it maybe in another chat, maybe have a Tom or a gallery person or two in curator to talk about that. Jan Howard at the RISD Museum might be willing to talk about it. But yeah, big changes probably. But with change, usually there's opportunity too. And so hopefully, can try to stay positive and try to find other ways of, putting your work out there like Giselle's doing.
I wanted to mention one more thing interesting about this blockchain type art. Because it can be, because it has a history, every time it's sold, a lot of the, I've been fighting with a whole bunch of artists for secondary sales. For the lifetime of the art piece, every time they're traded or sold, the original artist will get a percentage of that sale. This is something that's never been seen before in the art world. It usually goes to the first person who buys it, and then they trade it and get full price, benefits. So the artists now, what we're trying to establish as artists in the blockchain sphere is all the platforms that are selling the artworks are committing 10% of secondary sales to the artists themselves. So there's been artists that are selling for a good amount of money, and they end up with an email in the morning that it had transferred hands and sold for triple the amount. There's like wonderful things happening so that the lifetime of the artist can eventually gather up enough secondary sales to have a living, to have a way of having passive income for the artist. I think there's so many benefits to that for artists in the future. So I'm definitely a spokesperson for that, and have been working towards making sure the platforms do that as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. A royalty type model,
Mm-hmm.
right? In effect. Well, I wanted to thank you all for being so candid and open about your practice and your work, and specifically your career, and your experiences at RISD. Again, I wanted to thank the RISD Alumni and Photography Affinity Group for hosting, for Tran, the RISD Alumni Association. We will continue to do events like this. And we especially welcome our panelists, or thank our panelists for their time. And thanks to all the attendees for showing up and your wonderful questions. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay,